I remember the first day I noticed it, really noticed it. My daughter, the little girl who used to run into my arms every morning, who clung to me like I was the only safe place in the world, no longer looked at me the same way. Her smile was smaller, forced, almost mechanical. Her words, once warm and full of curiosity, had grown sharp and detached. And slowly, so slowly that at first I didn't realize, the distance between us had begun to widen. It started with small things. The way she no longer asked about my day, the way she no longer lingered at the breakfast table with me. I'd set her favorite cup of cocoa on the counter, warm and sweet, and she'd brush past without a word. "Morning," she'd mutter, barely glancing up from her phone. That same phone that had once been shoved into my hand with a grin, showing me her latest drawings or school projects. I missed that. I missed the way she had trusted me completely. At first, I thought it was just the teenage years catching up with her, but then it became something else. Something heavier, darker. I could feel it in the way she avoided sitting near me in the living room, how she laughed less at my jokes, how she started closing her bedroom door with a finality that felt like a wedge being driven between us. I tried to tell myself it wasn't serious. Give her time, I would say to myself late at night, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks as if they held some secret answer. But deep down, I knew this wasn't ordinary distance. This was anger. Resentment. Something she wasn't telling me, but that simmered in every glance, every sigh, every sharp word. The first time she snapped at me, it wasn't even about anything important. I had asked her to take out the trash, a simple household request. "I don't want to," she said, her voice flat, unfeeling. "Why do you always have to bother me?" I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to respond, to say something wise, calm, comforting, but instead, I froze. Because in that moment, I realized I couldn't reason with her. Not anymore. I began to notice patterns in her withdrawal. She avoided family dinners, claiming she had homework. She stayed in her room for hours, scrolling through her phone in silence. When I knocked, she would pretend not to hear. If I sent a message, she would either ignore it or reply with a cold, curt line that barely made sense. "Okay. Fine. Whatever." Words that once carried curiosity and affection now sounded like knives slicing through the air between us. And I felt helpless. Every day, I replayed our past together in my mind. The times I had tucked her into bed, reading her favorite stories until her eyes grew heavy and her breathing even. The mornings I would make her pancakes, shaped into hearts or stars, just to see her smile. The times I had stayed awake with her when she was sick, my hand pressed to her forehead, willing the fever to break, wishing I could take the pain away. And now, she was a stranger in her own home, a ghost of the little girl I had once held so close. I questioned myself constantly. What had I done wrong? Where had I failed? Was it something I said? Something I didn't say? I searched for answers in every interaction, analyzing every detail, replaying every conversation in my head. I would lie awake at night, heart pounding, imagining her telling her friends about me, imagining her feeling resentment for reasons I couldn't see. And yet, there were moments that didn't make sense. Moments when her gaze softened for just a second, a fleeting flicker of the little girl she used to be. A glance across the room where our eyes met, and for half a heartbeat, there was connection. But then it would vanish, leaving me more confused than before. I tried everything to reach her. I called her, leaving messages that poured out my heart, my worry, my longing. "Sweetheart, I miss you. I want to understand. Please, call me when you can." Days would pass. No answer. I sent texts, simple and gentle at first, then desperate, pleading. "Please talk to me. I feel like I'm losing you. Tell me what's wrong." I can't fix it if I don't know. Even a word, anything. I need to hear from you. Still, nothing. Silence. A hollow echo that made the house feel emptier with each passing day. I tried letters next. Handwritten, carefully folded, each word chosen with trembling hands. I poured my soul into them, recounting memories, reminding her of the love that had always existed between us, begging her to let me in. I would leave them on her bed, on her desk, tucked into the pages of her books. Sometimes she would glance at them, but never respond. Sometimes she would crumple them, I imagined, tossing them into the trash while I slept, unaware of her actions. Visits became another battlefield. I would knock on her door, standing outside in the hallway, feeling my heart sink as I heard her footsteps retreat further into her room. Sometimes she would answer, briefly, eyes downcast. "I'm busy," she would murmur, shutting the door softly but firmly. Other times, she wouldn't answer at all. And I would leave, heart heavier than before, feeling like a shadow in her life rather than a mother, like a ghost wandering through her memory, unseen, unheard. And yet, even in my heartbreak, I refused to give up. Because I knew, deep down, that this distance wasn't truly about me. It had to be something else. Something more. And I felt it in my bones, a quiet, insistent whisper I could not ignore. It had to be her father. I didn't know the details, not yet. But I could feel it. His presence, or perhaps his absence, loomed in her anger. His decisions, his secrets, the choices he had made in the past, had left their mark, and now, in her eyes, I could see the weight of unspoken truths pressing down on her. One evening, after another day of unanswered calls and unread messages, I wandered into my husband's study. A room I had not entered since his funeral, a room that smelled faintly of his cologne and the papers he had left behind. My hands lingered over the desk, tracing the lines where he had scribbled notes, old receipts, and photographs. And then I noticed something unusual. A panel, slightly ajar, as if it had been hidden deliberately. Curiosity and dread gripped me at the same time. I knelt down, my fingers trembling as I reached into the small space. And there, tucked away, were papers, letters, and documents that had clearly been meant to remain secret. My heart raced as I pulled them out, flipping through the pages with a mix of fear and anticipation. I didn't yet know the full story. I didn't know what these hidden letters contained. But something told me that within these pages lay the reason for the silence, for the anger, for the widening gap between my daughter and me. And as I sat on the floor of that study, clutching the letters to my chest, I realized that my next steps could change everything. The estrangement, the heartbreak, the long, painful silence, it all might come to an end. Or it could shatter what remained of our fragile connection forever. Either way, I knew I had to confront it. I had to uncover the truth. And that truth was hidden in those letters. The study smelled of old paper and faint traces of my husband's cologne, the kind he wore when he was working late into the night, lost in his thoughts. I had avoided this room for months after his funeral, too afraid of what memories it might stir, too terrified to confront the echoes of a life we had once shared. But that evening, driven by a mixture of desperation and intuition, I found myself stepping inside, drawn to a small, hidden panel in the corner of the desk. It was barely noticeable, almost mocking in its subtlety. A faint outline along the wood grain, as if it were meant to be discovered only by someone who was truly looking. My fingers shook as I pried it open, a cold thrill running through me. Behind the panel were letters, neatly stacked, some tied with faded ribbons, others sealed with envelopes that bore the faint imprint of his handwriting. And then there were documents, legal papers, receipts, photographs. Items that, even at first glance, radiated secrecy. I sat down on the floor, clutching the first letter to my chest, hesitating. I wanted to turn away. I wanted to put the papers back and pretend I hadn't found them, but some unrelenting part of me refused. It was a pull I couldn't resist. I unfolded the letter carefully, my eyes scanning the words as they etched themselves into my mind. It was addressed to a woman I had never heard of. Her name alone made me pause, familiar yet foreign, like a shadow that had been hiding just behind the curtain of my life. The letter was tender, personal, filled with a warmth my husband had never shown me in years. He wrote about meetings, plans, shared dreams. A life he had built outside of our marriage, outside of the home we had shared. A second life. Shock hit me first, sharp and jagged, leaving me breathless. My hands trembled as I sifted through more letters, documents, photographs. Each page added another layer to the picture I had never suspected. There were receipts for vacations I had never known about, hotel bookings, gifts sent to this other woman. There were photographs of my husband smiling with her, holding her hand, looking happy. Happy in a way he had never been with me for years. Anger flared, hot and consuming, burning through the initial shock. How could he have done this? How could he have lived this life, hidden it so completely, and left us, his family, to believe we were all that mattered? Betrayal coursed through my veins like ice water. Every memory of our life together now felt tainted, every moment reinterpreted through the lens of deceit. The dinners, the vacations, the smiles he had offered me, all now carried a shadow of falsehood I couldn't ignore. As I sat there, clutching the papers, memories began to surface, small, seemingly insignificant moments that suddenly took on a new meaning. The times he had been late for my daughter's school events, claiming work obligations, when in reality he had been meeting her mother. The weekends he had gone on business trips, during which receipts now proved he was elsewhere entirely. The gifts he had given me, or promised, that had never materialized, they were no longer just oversights. They were calculated omissions. Tears came unbidden, blurring the ink on the letters. I felt as though I were seeing a person I thought I knew completely for the first time, truly seeing him, and realizing how little of him had ever been mine. And then my thoughts turned to my daughter. My sweet, beautiful daughter, who had grown distant, cold, angry. Could this be the reason? Could this secret, buried so deeply, be the source of the rift that had torn us apart? I closed my eyes, gripping the letters against my chest, imagining her face, the way she had avoided me, the sharpness in her voice when she spoke. It all began to make sense, the withdrawal, the resentment, the pain I had thought was aimed at me. It wasn't me she was angry with. It was him. It was the betrayal she had felt, even if she hadn't known the full story. And yet, a new wave of uncertainty crashed over me. Do I tell her now? Or do I wait? Could revealing the secret too soon cause her more pain than it would heal? Could it push her further away, irreparably, if she wasn't ready? The questions tumbled in my mind, relentless, echoing against the walls of the quiet study. I thought about the letters again. Some of them were old, from years ago, and some recent. He had maintained this life even as he fell ill, even as we mourned together. I could almost feel the weight of the deception pressing down on me, a tangible, suffocating presence. The thought of my daughter learning this from someone else, or discovering it accidentally, made my stomach twist in knots. I read through one more letter, the handwriting now seeming to mock me. He had written about love, about longing, about a life they would build together. The tenderness of it cut me in two. My heart ached, not just for myself, but for my daughter, for the betrayal she had unknowingly carried in her heart, for the confusion and pain that had driven her away. Anger, grief, and fear blended into a single, suffocating storm. I could feel my hands shaking, my chest tightening, my mind racing with possibilities. How had I never known? How had I missed all the signs? And most importantly, how would I ever tell her? I began to organize the letters, reading each one slowly, trying to understand the timeline of his secret life. Patterns emerged. There were vacations, special occasions, even holidays he had spent elsewhere, gifts given in secrecy, and moments I had thought were merely oversights. Every page deepened the betrayal. And yet, in the midst of my anguish, a flicker of clarity emerged. I realized that this was the key to rebuilding my relationship with my daughter. The truth, fully revealed, honestly told, would be the bridge between us. But how could I frame it? How could I tell her without shattering her completely, without making her grief turn into resentment towards me instead? The weight of responsibility pressed down on me like a stone. I felt the room closing in, the shadows of the past wrapping around me, whispering that once this secret left the room, nothing would ever be the same. I remembered the times I had tried to reach her, calls unanswered, texts ignored, letters unopened. Each attempt had been met with silence, and now I understood why. Her anger, her confusion, her heartbreak, it had a source, a reason I had never suspected until this moment. I spent hours there that night, sorting the documents, reading, crying, imagining. The clock ticked past midnight, but I didn't notice. I was lost in the weight of discovery, the avalanche of emotion, the storm of betrayal and sorrow. And slowly, a decision began to form in my mind. I would tell her. Not today, not in a rush, not in a careless moment. But I would tell her. She had a right to know the truth. She had a right to understand why her father had been the way he was, why the anger had built up inside her, why the silence had stretched between us for so long. She deserved the chance to see the man she thought she knew for who he truly was, and she deserved the chance to release the anger that had haunted her. Bond, stronger and more honest than anything we had known before. I didn't know when I would tell her. I didn't know how she would react. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: the secret would not stay hidden forever. And when the time came, she would finally know the truth about her father, and perhaps, finally, understand why she had turned away from me. I gathered the letters and documents into a neat stack, my fingers trembling as I did so. I would keep them safe until the right time, until I had prepared myself to be strong for her, to guide her through the revelation without leaving her alone in the storm. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew there would be tears, perhaps screams, perhaps silence. But I also knew that truth, painful as it was, had the power to heal in ways lies never could. And as I turned off the light and left the study, carrying the secret that had been hidden for so long, I felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. Fear for the impact it would have on my daughter, on us, on the fragile bridge we had left. And hope that, one day, this revelation could be the beginning of a new understanding, a new bond, stronger and more honest than anything we had known before. I didn't know when I would tell her. I didn't know how she would react. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: the secret would not stay hidden forever. And when the time came, she would finally know the truth about her father, and perhaps, finally, understand why she had turned away from me. I spent the entire night awake, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, the letters clutched in my hands like a lifeline. Their edges were worn from my grip, but I couldn't put them down. Each word seemed heavier than the last, each revelation pressing on my chest until it felt like I couldn't breathe. And in that darkness, one thought kept echoing over and over: I had to tell her. I had tried everything else: calls, messages, letters, visits. I had tried patience, gentleness, time. But none of it had worked. My daughter remained distant, cold, and unreachable. I realized, finally, that the silence between us wasn't caused by a lack of effort on my part. It was caused by a truth she didn't yet know. And that truth had the power to either destroy the remaining bond we had or to rebuild it stronger than before. I remembered the nights she had cried in her room after arguments with her father. I had tried to comfort her then, to offer explanations and solace, but now I knew those moments were different than I had thought. She wasn't just grieving him, she was angry at the lies she had unknowingly been forced to live with. Her resentment wasn't directed at me, but at the ghost of the father who had hidden so much from us both. And in that realization, I felt both despair and clarity. I could see it in my mind, the memory of her sitting at the kitchen table, tears streaking her cheeks after a fight, shouting at me in frustration. "Why does everything always have to be about him?" she had yelled. At the time, I had assumed she was upset about some small disagreement, some trivial argument. But now, as I held the letters, I understood the full weight of her words. Her life had been shaped by secrets, omissions, and betrayals she had never fully understood until now. And in that, she had carried anger for years that wasn't hers to bear alone. I pressed my hands to my face, feeling the tears come again. Could I handle telling her? Could I bear to watch the heartbreak in her eyes, to see the shock, the anger, the possible resentment toward me for holding back for so long? I felt my pulse quicken, the tightness in my chest growing with each thought. I imagined her yelling, accusing me of hiding things, blaming me for not seeing the signs sooner. The possibility terrified me, yet I knew I had no choice. The letters were too heavy to remain hidden, and the distance between us was too vast to be bridged by silence. I picked up my phone and stared at her name on the screen. The cursor blinked, a small, persistent heartbeat of possibility. My thumb hovered over the call button, and I felt every beat of my own heart echo in my ears. Would she answer? Would she scream at me? Would she hang up before I could say a single word? My fingers trembled, and yet I pressed the button. "Hello?" Her voice was cautious, thin, and wary. "Hi, sweetheart," I began, my voice soft, steady, though my heart felt like it was about to burst. Can we meet? There's something I need to tell you. Something important about your father." There was silence on the other end. I could almost hear her heartbeat through the phone. Then, finally, a whisper. "Okay." The single word felt heavier than any sentence, heavier than the weight of the letters in my hands. I could feel the tension in my own chest, the tremble of anticipation and fear. The choice had been made. The bridge would either crumble or hold. And I knew that when we met, everything could change. Forever. I began to plan the meeting in my mind. I needed a place that felt safe, private, neutral, somewhere she could breathe without feeling cornered, somewhere she could express herself without fear. The local park came to mind, the one where we used to go on weekends when she was little. The one where we had spent hours walking, laughing, talking about everything and nothing. It was familiar, safe, neutral. Perfect for what had to come. As I envisioned her sitting across from me on the worn wooden bench, her arms crossed, her eyes wary, my stomach churned. What words would I choose? How would I start? How much could I tell at once, and how much would she be able to hear? The internal debate raged like a storm, and yet beneath it all, a single truth anchored me: she deserved honesty. She deserved the whole truth. I recalled another memory, her standing in the doorway during a fight between her father and me, her small body tense, eyes wide. I had wanted to shield her, to protect her from the conflict, to make her feel safe. But now I realized I had shielded her from something else entirely, the truth that might have prepared her, in some small way, for the feelings that had been building inside her all these years. The guilt was heavy. I had tried to protect her, and in doing so, I had left her alone in a storm she couldn't see. I paced the room, clutching the letters again. I read snippets of them aloud, as though speaking them could help me organize my thoughts, could help me find the right tone, the right way to approach her. My voice wavered. I choked back tears. My pulse raced. The house felt too quiet, the shadows of the night stretching long across the walls, pressing against me, mirroring the tension I felt in my chest. And then I thought of her face. The small gestures I had missed, the way she had avoided eye contact, the way she had stiffened when I approached, the silence that had stretched like a canyon between us. I thought of the way she might feel, finally learning the truth. And despite the fear, despite the trembling in my hands and the ache in my chest, I knew I couldn't turn back. I envisioned her reaction, imagining every possible scenario. Tears, anger, disbelief, silence, shaking hands, a trembling voice. Perhaps even accusations directed at me. But I reminded myself that none of this was my fault. The secrecy had not been mine to create, but the choice to reveal it, honestly, was. And I had to be strong, for her, and for us both. Hours passed as I rehearsed the conversation in my mind, each line weighed carefully. Sweetheart, there's something about your father, something I think you deserve to know. Or perhaps, I found letters today, and I need you to understand the truth, all of it. The phrasing mattered, I knew. Too harsh, and she might recoil. Too gentle, and she might not grasp the gravity. It had to be honest, direct, careful, and loving all at once. Finally, as dawn crept through the curtains, painting the room in soft gold and pink, I made my decision. I would meet her that afternoon at the park, on the old wooden bench beneath the large oak tree where we had spent so many moments together. I would tell her everything. The secret, the betrayal, the hidden life he had lived. And I would do it with love, with honesty, and with the hope that the truth could heal rather than destroy. I gathered the letters into a neat stack, wrapping them carefully in a cloth to protect them, and placed them into my bag. Each movement felt deliberate, purposeful. I knew there would be no turning back once we met. I felt my heart hammer in my chest, a rapid drumbeat of fear, anticipation, and hope. Every step, every breath, every flutter of adrenaline reminded me that this moment could change everything. As I stepped out the door, the morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves and distant rain. The world seemed to hold its breath with me, as if waiting to see what would unfold. My hands were steady now, though my heart raced. I had made the choice. I had accepted the responsibility. I had committed to honesty. And soon, my daughter and I would confront the past together. I whispered a silent prayer under my breath, a plea for strength, for patience, for understanding. And as I walked toward the car, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me, a fragile, tentative hope that this meeting, this conversation, could finally begin to mend the rift that had haunted us for so long. Because some truths are too heavy to carry alone. And some secrets, no matter how long they have been hidden, demand to be revealed. The park felt impossibly quiet that afternoon, as if the world itself had sensed the gravity of what was about to happen. The old wooden bench beneath the oak tree, the one we had spent countless weekends on, now seemed impossibly small, impossibly fragile, as though it could barely bear the weight of the truth I was about to share. I arrived early, heart pounding, letters pressed tightly against my chest, fingers trembling from a mixture of fear, anticipation, and exhaustion. When she arrived, she didn't run into my arms as she once did. She walked slowly, shoulders stiff, eyes downcast. For a moment, I wanted to call her name, to reach out, but I knew I had to let her come to me, to approach on her terms. My daughter, my little girl who had grown into a woman filled with suspicion and hurt, now looked almost foreign in the crisp light of the afternoon. Her hair fell across her face, and she glanced at me briefly before looking away, like she was afraid she might see me too clearly and shatter. "Hi," I said softly, my voice trembling despite my efforts to steady it. She said nothing. She sat down at the far end of the bench, leaving space between us that felt wider than any ocean I had ever crossed. My hands shook as I placed the letters on my lap, the paper rustling softly in the quiet. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold breeze brush across my face, a sensory anchor as I tried to collect my thoughts. "There's something I need to tell you," I began, voice low, deliberate. "Something about your father, something I think you deserve to know. Her eyes flicked up at me, sharp and wary. I don't know if I want to hear it, she whispered, voice barely audible, trembling like a leaf caught in a gust of wind. I know, I said, nodding. I understand. I didn't want this to be your burden either, but the truth can't stay hidden anymore. Not if we want to have any chance of moving forward. Not if I want you to understand why things have been the way they have. I reached for the first letter, carefully unfolding it, and held it between us. These are letters from your father. To someone else. Someone he loved in a way he couldn't share with us. A life he built that I didn't know about, that you didn't know about. Her breath hitched. I saw the flicker of recognition, of shock, of betrayal begin to rise in her eyes. What are you saying? She asked, voice breaking. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I'm saying that your father had a secret life. A life where he was with someone else. Someone he cared for deeply. And I just discovered it today. Her face went pale, and then the anger erupted, jagged and immediate. Why are you telling me this now? Why didn't you ever tell me before? Her voice was sharp, cutting, full of years of unanswered questions. Tears welled in my eyes. I didn't know, I said softly, voice breaking. I didn't see it. I didn't understand what was happening. I thought the distance between us was just growing pains, misunderstandings. But it wasn't. It was this secret. And I wanted to tell you as soon as I understood. I wanted you to hear it from me, not from someone else, not from whispers or rumors. I wanted you to know the truth. Her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the bench. All this time, all these years, everything I felt, it wasn't just me being difficult. Her voice caught, the layers of grief and betrayal folding in on themselves. It was him? Yes, I whispered, leaning forward, feeling the weight of our shared pain in the space between us. It was him. Not you. Not ever you. It was his choices, his secrets, his life that we weren't part of. She looked down, jaw tight, and I could see the storm raging inside her, disbelief, grief, anger, and confusion swirling together. Her hands twisted in her lap, knuckles white, and she shivered slightly, the cold of the afternoon brushing against her skin, matching the chill of betrayal that clung to her heart. I reached out tentatively, hesitating just a fraction before letting my hand hover near hers. I know this is a lot, I said gently. And I know it hurts. It hurts me too. But you needed to know. And I want to be here for you as we try to understand it together. Her eyes snapped up at mine, tears spilling freely now. You knew? She whispered, voice shaking. You knew about him? No, I said, my voice firm despite the ache in my chest. I didn't know until today. That's why I'm telling you now. I wanted you to have the truth. I want you to understand why I think you've been so angry, so distant. You didn't deserve to carry that alone. She covered her face with her hands, her body trembling, and I could hear her sobs, small and jagged, breaking through the stillness. And in that moment, I realized something profound. The weight she had carried, the distance, the silence, it had all been born of a need for understanding, a need for truth. And now, finally, we had it. I took another letter from the stack, showing it to her carefully. Look, I said softly, pointing to the words. These letters, they're from him to her. You can see for yourself the way he hid it, the life he lived without us knowing. You deserve to know, and I want you to see it for yourself. She leaned forward, eyes scanning the letter, her hands still shaking. Her brow furrowed, and then she gasped, a short, sharp intake of breath that made my heart lurch. I can't believe this, she whispered, voice trembling. All these years. I thought I was just angry at everyone, at you, at him, at myself. But, she paused, voice breaking as she looked up at me, tears streaming down her cheeks. This explains so much. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. It explains a lot, yes. And it doesn't excuse what happened, but it does clarify. It helps us understand the anger, the confusion, the hurt. And maybe now we can start to heal. Her sobs subsided into quiet hiccups, and she finally looked at me, really looked at me, as though seeing me for the first time in years. I don't know if I can forgive him, she said softly. And I don't know if I can forgive you for not knowing sooner. I shook my head gently. I don't expect you to. I can't ask you to forgive me, or him, or anyone else right now. All I can do is be here with you. All I can do is tell you the truth, and help you carry it. And when you're ready, maybe then we can start to rebuild what's been broken. She wiped her face, still trembling, but there was a softness now in her eyes, a flicker of connection that had been missing for so long. The first small crack in the wall between us had appeared. And though it was fragile, it was there. I don't know what to say, she admitted, voice quiet, almost fragile. I feel everything all at once. Anger, sadness, relief, confusion, hope. She let out a shaky laugh, almost surprised by her own words. I think I needed this. Even if it hurts. I needed to know the truth. I reached out slowly, placing my hand over hers, feeling the warmth, the tremble, the life beneath my fingers. I'm here, I said. I'm not going anywhere. And we'll figure this out, together. We sat in silence for a few moments, the letters resting between us, the gentle rustle of the leaves overhead filling the space that had been so heavy with fear and tension. She leaned slightly toward me, her hand tightening around mine. And in that small, tentative gesture, I felt the first spark of reconnection, the fragile beginnings of understanding, the possibility of healing. I still need time, she said finally, voice soft, almost a whisper. I need to process all of this. But, thank you. For telling me. For being honest. For being here. I understand, I whispered, tears sliding down my cheeks. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. I'll be here. And as we sat there, side by side on the old wooden bench beneath the oak tree, the wind stirring the leaves above, I felt the first glimmer of hope in months. The anger, the betrayal, the grief, all still present, still heavy, but tempered now with understanding. The wall between us had begun to crack. And though the road ahead would be long and uncertain, for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed we could walk it together. Some truths are hard to bear. Some secrets can wound us deeply. But when spoken with honesty, with love, with courage, they also have the power to heal. And as I watched my daughter wipe her tears and meet my gaze, I realized that this moment, the revelation, the confrontation, the truth shared, was the beginning of something new. For the first time in years, we were not just mother and daughter. We were allies again, facing the world together, ready to rebuild what had been broken, one fragile, tentative step at a time. The days after our revelation felt fragile, like the first thin ice of winter that could crack beneath the weight of a misstep. I had expected her to withdraw, to retreat into the safe silence she had maintained for so long, but she surprised me. She came to visit the house, hesitant at first, lingering in the doorway, as if testing the waters before fully stepping back into my life. I remember the way she looked at me that afternoon, eyes wary but searching, scanning my face for some trace of deceit or weakness. I forced myself to stay calm, to meet her gaze with openness and patience. "Come in," I said softly, my voice gentle. She nodded, stepping inside, the familiar creak of the floorboards beneath her feet echoing through the house like a quiet welcome. We sat at the kitchen table, a space that had once been a battlefield of arguments and misunderstandings, now transformed into a neutral ground, a place where conversation could start again. She sipped tea quietly, her hands wrapped around the warm cup, and I watched her. Every small movement, every glance, was a sign of progress, however tentative. "It feels strange," she said finally, voice soft, almost hesitant. "To be here, with you, after everything." "I know," I replied, my heart tightening. "It's strange for me too. But it's a good strange. A chance to start again, slowly. Step by step." We talked for hours that afternoon, not about the letters or the betrayal, not about the secret that had torn us apart, but about small, ordinary things, her work, the books she had been reading, memories from her childhood. It was awkward at first, like learning a language we had forgotten, but slowly, laughter began to creep back into the room, quiet at first, tentative, then more certain, more genuine. I noticed how her eyes would light up at a shared memory, how her smile, when it appeared, softened the lines of grief and anger that had dominated her face for so long. And I realized then, with a bittersweet ache, that healing wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic apologies, it was about small, repeated acts of presence, of understanding, of time spent together. Days turned into weeks, and we began establishing small rituals, morning walks to the park, weekly dinners, late-night conversations over tea. We laughed at silly things, shared stories that had never been told, and slowly, the wall between us started to crumble. There were moments of friction, of old habits and misunderstandings trying to reassert themselves, but each conflict ended with patience, with listening, with the deliberate choice to understand rather than to react. I remember one evening, in particular, that felt like a turning point. We were sitting on the back porch, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold as the sun began to set. She had her sketchbook in her lap, doodling absent-mindedly, while I sipped my tea and watched the world slowly fade into twilight. "You know," she said quietly, "I never realized how much I needed to understand. Not just about him, but about us. About why I felt so angry, so distant. I think I needed to hear the truth to really start letting go." I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "It's not easy," I said softly. "Truth isn't always kind. But it has a power that nothing else does. It can hurt, yes, but it can also heal." She looked up at me, eyes glistening with unshed tears, and reached out, hesitating for a moment before placing her hand in mine. The contact was electric in its simplicity, a bridge rebuilt through warmth and trust. I held her hand gently, feeling the tremble of her fingers, the pulse of her heartbeat echoing through mine. In that small, intimate gesture, 1,000 unspoken words passed between us. I forgive, I understand, I'm here, and I love you. There were minor setbacks, of course. Old resentments flared in small bursts, forgotten calls, a comment misinterpreted, but each time, we chose patience. Each time, we spoke openly, allowed ourselves to be vulnerable, and gradually learned the art of repair. I discovered that healing wasn't linear, it was jagged, unpredictable, a series of steps forward and backward, with the promise that as long as we moved together, progress was possible. One afternoon, she invited me to join her for a painting class at the local community center. I had never been much of an artist, but I agreed, partly out of curiosity, partly as a gesture of willingness to engage in her world. As we painted side by side, sharing brushes, laughter, and quiet commentary on each other's strokes, I felt an unfamiliar lightness settle over me. The brushstrokes on the canvas mirrored the slow rebuilding of trust between us, sometimes bold, sometimes hesitant, but always intentional. "I'm glad," she said at one point, her voice soft, almost reverent. "I'm glad we're doing this. That we're here. Together." "Me too," I whispered, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "More than you know." The transformation wasn't instantaneous, and it wasn't perfect, but it was real. I began to notice small, meaningful changes. She would call me during the day just to say hello. We shared coffee on lazy Sunday mornings. She would confide in me about minor worries that she had once buried deep inside. And each of these moments, seemingly small and ordinary, was monumental in its quiet significance. I reflected often on the power of truth and patience, how the letters that had once shattered our lives had also become a tool for reconnection. How, in facing the pain honestly, we had built a foundation stronger than any pretense or silence could provide. I realized that love, like trust, required cultivation, attention, and a willingness to face discomfort. And in doing so, we were discovering a depth of understanding and intimacy that had been absent for far too long. One evening, as the first crispness of autumn drifted through the open windows, we sat together on the porch again, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was a riot of orange and pink, fading to violet and deep blue, and the world seemed to hold its breath for a brief, perfect moment. "I remember when I used to sit here as a child," she said quietly. "I would watch the sunset and think about how big the world was, and how small I felt. But now, it feels different. It feels like I have someone to share it with." I squeezed her hand gently, my chest tightening with emotion. "That's what I've been hoping for," I said softly. "That we could share it. That we could be us again." We watched in silence as the sun disappeared completely, leaving behind a calm, gentle darkness sprinkled with the first stars of evening. In that quiet, shared moment, I realized how far we had come, from estrangement to confrontation, from pain to tentative trust, and now, to the beginnings of something new. Something hopeful. Something alive. Laughter began to return more fully now, no longer tentative but natural, flowing through our interactions like a river reclaiming its course. We shared inside jokes, revisited old memories with new understanding, and allowed ourselves to be seen and accepted without judgment. The weight of the past had not disappeared, but it had transformed. It had become the foundation upon which we could rebuild. I found myself noticing her small gestures, the way she adjusted a pillow on the couch, the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed, the subtle expressions of care she showed in everyday life. And in return, I allowed myself to be vulnerable, to share my own thoughts, fears, and joys. The reciprocity of openness became our new rhythm, a dance of trust and intimacy that neither of us had thought possible just weeks before. One evening, as we finished a shared dinner, she reached across the table and took my hand. Her eyes were bright, unguarded, and filled with something I hadn't seen in years: hope. "I don't know what the future holds," she said softly. "But I know I want you in it. Not just as my mother, but as my friend. As someone I can rely on." I felt a lump in my throat, tears slipping unbidden down my cheeks. "I want that too," I whispered. "More than anything." We sat there holding hands, the small touch a powerful affirmation of the journey we had undertaken, the truth, the revelation, the confrontation, and now, the gentle rebuilding of trust. It was not a perfect resolution, but it was real. It was alive. And it carried with it the promise of hope, of connection, of a future shaped by honesty, patience, and love. As night fell and we stepped outside together, the sky now a deep indigo scattered with stars, I realized that healing wasn't a single moment, it was a collection of moments, each small and meaningful, stitched together with care and intention. And as we walked side by side, our hands brushing, hearts lighter than they had been in years, I felt the quiet, undeniable certainty that we had found our way back to each other. The journey had been long, painful, and uncertain. But in truth, in patience, and in shared vulnerability, we had rediscovered something invaluable, the enduring bond between mother and daughter, tempered by hardship, strengthened by honesty, and made beautiful by love. And in that final, quiet moment, watching the stars emerge, the night air crisp and comforting, our hands intertwined, I knew, with a deep, unshakable certainty, that this was only the beginning. I often sit alone now, in the quiet moments between the rush of daily life, and I find myself thinking about the journey we've taken, my daughter and I, and the lessons that have lingered, heavy yet illuminating, like the first golden light of dawn after a long, stormy night. I think about the years of distance, the walls of silence and misunderstanding that had grown between us, and the fragile bridge that we have begun to rebuild. Truth, I have learned, is both a burden and a balm. It cuts deep when hidden, festering in the shadows of our hearts, poisoning the connections we hold most dear. But when it is shared, even in small, trembling pieces, it has the power to heal in ways that nothing else can. It was the truth about my daughter's father, his secrets, his choices, the life he had lived outside our knowledge, that finally allowed us to confront the unspoken anger, the confusion, the grief that had taken root over the years. And in telling her, in showing her the letters, I realized that honesty is not just about revealing facts, it is about offering the other person the chance to understand, to process, to reclaim what has been lost. I think about forgiveness. Not the kind of forgiveness that comes easily, or that erases the pain, but the kind that grows slowly, rooted in the understanding of human imperfection. My daughter's initial shock, her anger, her tears, they were not failures or rejections of me. They were expressions of a heart grappling with betrayal, navigating a labyrinth of emotions too complex for words alone. And I understood then that forgiveness is not a destination, it is a practice, a conscious decision to hold space for another's humanity, to accept the flaws and mistakes that make us who we are. Resilience is another lesson I carry. I have watched my daughter's resilience unfold in the days and weeks after our confrontation, how she navigated the pain, how she allowed herself to feel it fully, and yet how she chose, every day, to reach out, to laugh, to share moments with me. And I have seen my own resilience mirrored back in her willingness to trust again, to allow vulnerability to seep into our relationship, and to rebuild from the rubble of secrets and unspoken truths. Resilience, I have realized, is not a solitary act. It is nurtured in connection, in empathy, in the shared courage to face discomfort and still choose love. I think of the small moments that now define us, sitting on the porch at dusk, our hands brushing together as we laugh about a memory from years past, walking through the park, noticing the sunlight catching her hair, sharing an unspoken understanding that has replaced the silence of estrangement, the quiet evenings spent painting side by side, our brushes moving in tandem, creating something fragile yet beautiful. These moments, seemingly ordinary, carry the weight of profound healing. They are the stitches in the fabric of a relationship once torn, and they are proof that love, even when battered by betrayal, can endure, transform, and thrive. Family, I have come to understand, is not simply a matter of blood or shared history. It is a living, breathing entity, shaped by our choices, our courage, our willingness to confront the shadows that haunt us. It is built on honesty, nurtured by empathy, and strengthened by the ability to forgive without losing oneself. I have learned that the fractures we fear, the secrets we hide, do not define the entirety of our relationships. They are but moments, painful, yes, but moments that can, if faced with care and courage, lead to deeper connection, understanding, and love. I reflect on the nature of betrayal, too, not as an abstract concept, but as a living force that shapes hearts and minds. Betrayal has the power to wound, to isolate, to make us question the foundations of our lives. Yet, it also carries a lesson, that the truth, once known, has the power to transform that pain into wisdom, into clarity, into a renewed sense of purpose. I have watched my daughter process this truth, her anger in grief-giving way, slowly but surely, to understanding and compassion, not for the betrayal itself, but for the human frailty that caused it. And I have learned alongside her, growing in empathy, patience, and awareness of the delicate threads that bind us to one another. In these reflections, I realize the immense power of communication. Words, when chosen with care, when spoken with honesty and courage, can bridge the deepest divides. I remember the moment I decided to call my daughter, to arrange the meeting at the park, and the fear that accompanied that decision. But I also remember the first tearful glance we shared as I revealed the letters, the trembling hands, the gasps of disbelief, and how those words, difficult though they were, became the lifeline that tethered us back together. Communication is not merely about speaking, it is about listening, observing, and creating a space where truth can exist without judgment, where vulnerability is met with understanding, where love is expressed through honesty rather than avoidance. I look back on the journey with a quiet awe. The estrangement that had seemed insurmountable, the emotional chasms that once felt too wide to cross, have become navigable through patience, courage, and the deliberate choice to embrace discomfort in pursuit of connection. The act of facing truth, of allowing ourselves to be raw and exposed, has reshaped the landscape of our relationship. It has taught me that healing is not linear, that progress is often measured in whispers, glances, and small acts of presence rather than grand gestures. And yet, the most profound revelation of all is the resilience of love, the way it bends but does not break, how it endures the storms of betrayal, distance, and anger, emerging on the other side tempered and renewed. My daughter and I have walked through grief, shock, and disbelief together. We have confronted the painful shadows of the past, and we have chosen, deliberately and tenderly, to step into the light together. That choice, the decision to prioritize connection over resentment, truth over silence, has been the most transformative of all. I think of the symbolic moments that now anchor our bond, the touch of her hand in mine, a shared laugh at an old memory, the quiet companionship of watching the sunset together. These gestures, simple yet profound, are proof that healing is not a single event but a tapestry woven from repeated acts of presence, love, and honesty. They are reminders that the heart, though fragile, is resilient, and that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt with care and attention. As I sit in reflection, I realize that the past, painful though it was, has shaped the depth of our present. The estrangement, the confrontation, the revelation, all have become chapters in a story that is ongoing, unfinished, yet brimming with possibility. I have learned to accept the past not as a source of shame or regret, but as a teacher, guiding me toward patience, understanding, and a deeper appreciation for the complexity of human relationships. I close my eyes and breathe deeply, letting the memories of our journey wash over me. I see the letters, the trembling hands, the tearful eyes, the moments of laughter, the quiet evenings, the shared walks, the sunsets. Each memory is a thread in the fabric of our relationship, each one contributing to a tapestry that is imperfect yet beautiful, flawed yet whole. And in that reflection, I find peace. I see my daughter not as a figure of anger or estrangement, but as a partner in a shared journey of growth, a fellow traveler who has taught me the profound power of truth, the necessity of patience, and the enduring strength of love. I see our bond, once fractured, now resilient, capable of weathering future storms because it has been tempered by honesty, courage, and empathy. As I rise from my seat, I step into the gentle embrace of the evening air, carrying with me a quiet certainty. The road ahead will not be without challenges, but it will be walked together. The lessons of betrayal, estrangement, revelation, and healing are etched into my heart, reminders of the fragility and resilience of love. And in each step forward, I carry hope, the hope that through patience, honesty, and unwavering care, family can endure, can grow, and can thrive. To anyone who listens to this story, I hope you carry this with you. Secrets, lies, and unspoken truths may shadow our lives, but they do not have to define them. The courage to speak honestly, the patience to listen, the empathy to understand, and the willingness to forgive, these are the tools that can transform pain into connection, estrangement into intimacy, and betrayal into growth. I take one last look at the horizon, the sun now fully set, the sky deep and vast, dotted with stars. I feel the weight of the past lift slightly from my shoulders, replaced by the warmth of understanding, the quiet joy of reconnection, and the luminous promise of a future shaped not by secrecy or regret, but by honesty, compassion, and enduring love. In the soft hush of night, I realize this: life is a fragile, beautiful journey, shaped by choices, truth, and courage. Love, though tested, can endure. Relationships, though strained, can heal. And the human heart, though wounded, has an extraordinary capacity to forgive, to grow, and to embrace hope. I hold these truths close as I prepare for tomorrow, knowing that the journey continues, but that we, my daughter and I, have discovered something priceless, the unbreakable, resilient bond of family, forged through trials, strengthened by truth, and made luminous by love. And as I close my eyes, feeling the gentle rhythm of my breath, I whisper a quiet vow to the universe, to honor truth, to cherish connection, to nurture love, and to walk forward with patience, courage, and hope. For in the end, it is not the betrayals or the secrets that define us, but the grace with which we confront them, the courage with which we reveal them, and the love that allows us to heal together.